Good evening. My name is Mike Haney, and welcome to another edition of 60 Minutes in Black America. This is the National Election Week in America, a crucial midterm election week. We've got a outstanding educational show for you today. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Good evening once again. My name is Mike Haney, and thank you for watching 60 Minutes in Black America this week. This week is a very, very critical week for our country as we go into national elections again. We know that our House of Representatives nationally is every 2 years, and we have very important governor races around the country. And so we're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about the implications of the national races. We talk about who takes control of the House, who takes control of the Senate. Can Joe Biden, who was elected in 2020 as a Democrat, hold on to the House of Representatives and Senate to get his agenda through? Is the country in the mood, or is that the check and balance that the country wants and feels they deserve, is to have a House and a Senate that is Republican when you have a Democratic president in the White House? Well, Donald Trump faced that, Barack Obama faced that, and it looks as though Joe Biden is going to face that. And particularly coming off of the climate and the mood of this country that we've experienced in the past 6 years. You know, a lot of dissension, a lot of confusion around elections, around balloting, around voting. You know, where do we understand? Where do we stand as a nation? So far, this election cycle, we have seen record number of voters, which is unusual for a midterm, with the exception of young people and blacks. And in many states, they are saying that it will be crucial if Democrats are to have any chance of holding on to the Senate or the House, that black voters have to come out in the numbers that they came out in 2008 with Obama and even in 2020 with Joe Biden. Will they come out? Do they feel as though it's important? Is abortion a issue that brings voters out in the black community? Is the economy and inflation something that brings voters out? Is the threat, if they view it a threat, of having a Republican-controlled House and a Republican-controlled Senate a big enough threat to have black voters and young people come out? We don't know. We'll see, you know, but we know that the older voter, the Republican white voter, the suburban women voter are coming out in record numbers across the country. Before we get into talking about the races, and today we'll talk about races in Wisconsin, Arizona, Florida, Nevada a bit, Pennsylvania. We'll talk about the governor's race in Maryland. We want to get into education. We want to get into voter education. We want to talk about ballots. We want to talk about voting. We want to talk about referendums on in many states around the country. Marijuana, cannabis legalization is on the ballot. In many ballots around the country, they have constitutional amendments for that particular state relative to voter rights and how ballots will be counted, and whether a voting time frame is one in which you extend it for almost a month, which we see in some states, you know, through early voting. You know, what does early voting mean? How are votes counted? And so we have with us today what I describe as a political activist, someone that watches the issues, someone that watches the ballots, someone that looks at ballots beyond just the names that we usually associate with as president, as congressman, as council person in our district. But what do these referendums mean? How do we look at a ballot in addition to just voting for the people, that we understand the questions? And this is wherever you are. So as you go to the polls, if you haven't gone already and voted, and you look for the House of Representative in your district, or you look for the governor in your district, that you also pay attention to the middle of the page where you have significant bond issues in many instances and other questions that may be as relevant as voting for the individual. So I'd like to bring Rhonda Wimbish, a local political activist here in the state of Maryland, on the stream. Rhonda, how are you doing today? And I think Rhonda's audio, Rhonda, your audio, and I think they still have trouble hearing you.
Can
And
you
we'll
hear me?
work that. Now we can hear you. I know that there's some people that would love to have you muted all the time, but not here on this show. We don't want you muted on this show. We want to hear what you have to say. You know, and you always have been one that I have watched that has been from an educational perspective. So what we like to do is educate voters, right? And
Mhm.
maybe we use Maryland or Baltimore as an example when we talk about voting. And a question for you, and first of all, let's talk about your activism, because
Okay.
I know I have seen you in action, heard you in action, and you walk in, and it's not like you're the as tall as Lou Alcindor or Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, but you know, you walk into a room and people shudder and stutter, and they're like, okay, who invited her? Because one thing that you do, which is part of the education today, is that you study and read the issues and you become very familiar with that and this fine print. So, talk about why you do that and what it is that you do to ensure that other people do that in your jurisdiction. And let's use Baltimore as a point of reference. I know you lived in DC, I know you've lived in Georgia, but let's use Baltimore as a point of reference that our viewership across the country, be it in Alabama, be it in Georgia, be it in Nevada, be it in Florida, can understand what they need to look for as they go to the polls as well.
So, Michael, first I want to say thank you for having me. And you look well today. I had a family of community people. My mom, my dad, my grandparents, my dad and my grandfather were Republicans. My grandmother and my mother were Democrats, and it was always a conversation at the table. Even though I didn't really get involved in it, I didn't really take a position when it was time for me to vote. I became a Democrat like my mother. But I often, since I've been a voter, cross party lines because I looked at the issues, what's relevant to me. And if I didn't look at it, my father would have asked me, like, what you doing with the, election? Who you going for? So when I became a mother and my daughter had special needs, I quickly understood I'm dealing with some bureaucracy. I'm dealing with politics here. And when I moved back to Baltimore, that's what it became. I had to take on legal battles with the school system. And ultimately, it became my community. And it was just reading legislation and city charter. And that's why I'm here where I am now, because once your eyes get opened up to certain issues, you can't stop reading. You keep looking for a better way. You keep looking for why so many things keep going wrong. So, and also, I mentioned that I have a child. She's an adult now, and she's 24 years old. She has special needs, and she is a voter.
Wow.
And I taught her, and we still going over. That's why I very seldom early vote, because it takes a long time to decipher one who I'm going to vote for and the questions that are there. So we're going to be ready on Tuesday. She's going to be ready to vote, and I'm going to be ready to vote. And we're
So
two
when you
different.
say that when you're going to be ready to vote, and most of us look at the personalities, the people. You know, we look at in Maryland, the governor race between Dan Cox and Westmore, and we'll talk about that a little later. You know,
Mm,
when you say that you're going to be ready to vote, you're talking about the entire ballot. You're talking about the
yeah,
constitutional amendment, the constitutional
yes.
questions. Why is it so important for our viewership across this country to understand that they have to read? And do people get into the polling place? And maybe this is a reason why absentee balloting or early voting may be more advantageous for us because it gives us a chance to understand, study the issues. Why is it that we don't pay real attention to it?
I don't know. I don't know why we don't. I think that we got comfortable. We just got comfortable that the people who we had representing us was doing a good job. We didn't look at who put this question on this ballot and how does it get on there. If I talk to the average person in my community, and I live in a very I would consider, educated community, black community. If I ask the average person in my community, how does a question get on a ballot? They're going to say, I don't know. But there's
Wow.
a process. And listen, it could be a costly process to get a question on a ballot. It takes money, it takes signatures, it takes influence.
Wow. Well, you know, I want to go to a ballot so people can see. And you're watching 60 Minutes in Black America. This is our general election edition, as this is a very important election in our country. And we're talking initially about the ballot. We're talking about the ballot, not so much in the names, but some of the questions. And we're going to pull up a sample ballot and we're going to ask Rhonda to give us. We're going to go to question one. Let's go to question one on the ballot that we as an example, Rhonda, and give us your perspective on that particular question as it relates to the jurisdiction. And so it talks about constitutional amendment, Court of Appeals, and Special Appeals renaming. So could you give us in a nutshell what this question is and what you feel the significance of it is that we need to know about and how you perceive that we should vote as a result of it?
So the first thing I did when I opened up my ballot and I took time out because it takes a while to do the questions, referendum, who sponsored it, why is it there, who put it there, that sort of thing. It takes me about a week to really delve into it. And this particular question bothered me because of the vagueness of it. The highest court in the state of Maryland is Court of Appeals. If you have a judgment by a judge in the circuit court, whatever jurisdiction you're in, and you're not happy with that judge's decision, and you feel you weren't treated fairly or some information didn't get in and all of that, but it has to be something that was already put in, but you didn't feel it was fairly ruled on, there was the Court of Appeals that you could appeal that circuit court judge. Now, with this question, it says we're going to change the name. Like it's just a renaming to change it to a Maryland Supreme Court. But nothing about does the rules stay the same. I went to Court of Appeals as a pro se person. I don't know if I can do that as a Maryland Supreme Court of Maryland naming, but they're so vague, and that vagueness to me is very concerning throughout the ballot questions. What is the purpose? Typically, our ballot questions will say, we need to rename the Court of Appeals for the state of Maryland to be in line with everyone else in the nation. That's not what it says. It just says we're going to rename it. So that looks like
Wow.
to me I've lost some rights in the court process.
And so that means something to us, really. But if we don't pay attention and study it as a people, some of this gets by us until we find ourselves in a position where we have to argue in front of the special appeals. Then we can refer back to that ballot question
Exactly.
where we arbitrarily voted for or against and
Right.
didn't really understand what we were voting for. Let's go to a question on cannabis. I think it's question B on
Okay.
that ballot as well. And let's look at this question because many of us are intrigued about this. It legalizes cannabis or marijuana. That's what I call it in this jurisdiction for recreational use. For
Question
recreational
4.
use.
It's
So
question
is this
4.
the one for Is this for cannabis? Is this the cannabis
No,
question?
it's question 4.
Question four. I'm sorry. There we go. There we go. Just past it. There we go. It says, do you favor the legalization of the use of cannabis by an individual who is at least 21 years of age on or after July 2023 in the state of Maryland? So, Rhonda, what's the significance of this question?
So right now, right, it's very easy to get a cannabis medical card if you have some type of medical affliction. So right now, what the state wants to do is tap into that tax base. Because if it becomes recreational and you can walk into a store and buy cannabis, right now it's not taxed. You can go into Ethos or whatever, and just buy with your card that you have whatever product is there without paying taxes. If it becomes recreational, it's going to be taxed. So I don't have a problem with that, with the exception is what about those people that medically need it? It's going to be like the pharmaceutical companies where the price goes up.
Wow.
So right
Wow.
now, there are people who have mental health issues that have found cannabis to be beneficial to them. It's not cheap to buy it. It's not cheap, but it's manageable. But if it gets taxed and that price goes up, we're going to be right where we are with prescriptions.
Wow. Well, that's interesting that you say that in terms of, you're okay with it. When I look at a legalization of marijuana on a ballot so that recreational marijuana use becomes legalized in the state, I think about the thousands of young black people that were locked up decades ago for selling marijuana, right? And then I watched on a special this morning of this 150-acre cannabis factory in a part of the state of Maryland that is waiting for this. And, our people in many of our jurisdictions were left out of this because they didn't have the capital B to sustain it. So all of a sudden, do we not see dealers as there were before on the streets now because you can get it in our neighborhoods sold by people that have set this up as a legitimate business? Is that a reason why they now want to legalize it because they've widened the pool of
Yeah.
potential money and users?
But it's money. It's all about money. It's not about oh, cannabis can help people. It's not, it's about money. And it's always about money. And it should be about money. And that's what we should be on. It should be about money, but it also should have a moral aspect of it. Because just like with the pharmaceutical company, I happen to be someone who no longer has an EpiPen, which I need in case I get a bee sting or anything, because the EpiPen cost me $500 now.
Wow.
When it
Wow.
used to be $50. That's
Wow.
pharmaceuticals. That's where we're going to be with cannabis. Now, with you and I, Michael, as business people, we should be making some investments in this. It shouldn't be us locked out of it. It should be us putting our money together for it because
Wow.
it's here. And if it doesn't happen on this ballot, it's going to happen on the next ballot.
Wow. Well, I want to go quickly to two more before we bring in our other panelists to talk about national election and talk about the election in Maryland. I want to take a look at question D, just for its content. Matter of fact, you can actually leave it at question A. Leave it at question A. Leave it at question A.
Mm-hmm.
So they got question D up there. Now, Rhonda,
Mm-hmm.
I am not going into and viewers that are voting and go to the polling place on Tuesday or cast a absentee ballot, how many of you are really reading this information? Scroll down a little bit more and show all this, right? Am I really reading and understanding in the 10 or 15 minutes that I'm in a polling place something of consequence that in many instances asks for bond bills of millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars, if not hundreds of millions of dollars, so that a municipality can go and fund something, be it land acquisition, be it giving TIFs or tax incremental funding to private organizations. How many of us are really have the capacity to absorb this, Rhonda?
Well, the sad part is, and I was reading this, I think it was in the Washington Post, they said the average question gets approved on the ballot, and questions A, B, C, and D are generic. You see the same questions on every ballot. City, state election, it doesn't matter. And what they're asking for you to approve a blank check for a project that you don't know is going to happen. We never like how they spend the money. So why keep giving somebody money if you don't like how they spend the money? When is the last time somebody built a library? But that question said they're going to do it. Not in my lifetime. There has been some renovations, but we never knew how much was in the pot.
Borrow up to $72 million. $72 million. And look what this is for. This is in this. And if you're in Oakland, if you're in Miami, if you're in New York City, if you're in Chicago, believe me, you have, because, all of these organizations, all of these city councils work typically the same way. I guarantee you, when you look at your ballot has very similar questions. Now, Rhonda, I want to go quickly to question K. If we can pull up question K. Question K deals with term limits, right? Term limits. And this to the point of what you had said earlier in your opening remarks about who funds these initiatives. And there was an organization, mainly a individual that owned a broadcast company nationwide, Sinclair Broadcast Company. The owner of that gentleman, I believe his name is John Smith, funded almost $500,000 for this ballot question. And so my question to you, Ron, is that many people have been crying for term limits, particularly in this jurisdiction in the city of Baltimore. People are crying for term limits all over the country. And then all of a sudden, to the point of the question being a referendum on the ballot that people can vote yes or no for, they had issue because this very conservative business person who's perceived as not favorable to the African American or black community paid to have this on the ballot. Should it make a difference? And should we look at who funds it, or do we look at the opportunity to finally get something as important like this into law?
I don't believe that. Of course, you should look at who funds it, and you should look at why he funded it. And that's what I looked at. So I've heard that
Why did he fund it, Rhonda? Why do you feel he funded it?
because he's locked out of doing business in Baltimore City. The good old boys have been in place through the Democrats' machine for so long that they let in who they want to let in. And he's not in. So he says, well, wait a minute, I got to move these people out the way. That's why he funded it.
But that doesn't necessarily change the landscape, and we can probably bring Bob and Beverly in and be part of this conversation as well. We know that in Chicago, they have had, machine politics in Chicago for decades and decades and decades of Democratic rule. And it doesn't mean that the landscape, particularly in Baltimore, is going to change Republican because, the state of Maryland is over what, 70% a Democratic state. Baltimore City is over 80% Democratic. What difference would it make to him that he has term limits in place? Or really, what difference should it make to us that we have term limits in place? So the argument for term limits is that it allows younger people to get involved in the political process. It stops special interests from ruling our government. The argument against term limits is that it erodes our institutional knowledge and it makes it difficult to conduct business. This is what some institutional people are saying, that term limits is not a good thing. What do you say, Rhonda?
That's it. Bring on the term limits.
Bring on the term limits. And so, and let's transition and bring on Bob DeShield.
Okay.
And Bob, how you doing today? And Bob is on mute as well. And while Bob gets off of mute, how you doing, Bob?
I'm great, Michael. How are you? Hi, Rocky.
Doing fantastic. And we've got a bit of an echo production team. And Bob's been on with us before, and that's happened before. So whatever we need to do and mute, that would be great. And then let's bring in Beverly Cooper Wheeling as well from Boston.
Hi,
Hey,
Vanessa.
Bev, how are you?
I'm hanging in there, thanks.
Always good to see you. Always good to see you, Bob, Bev, Rhonda. We were talked about term limits. We're going to transition to the national conversation in terms of the importance of national elections to all of us. And I know, Beverly, you do a lot of work in that regard. You just got off of a 50-hour train ride from Iowa out there helping to campaign for these races out there. So we're going to talk about that. But when it comes to term limits, right? When it comes to term limits, Rhonda said, bring it on. Bob, what do you say about term limits?
Wouldn't have the opportunity to elect the first black governor in the state of Maryland. So I'm for
So,
term limits.
so you say term limits gave us a right to elect the first black governor potentially in the state of Maryland.
That's true.
How about you, Beverly? What do you say about term limits?
I think we have term limits when we pay attention to how we vote. If we decide that someone isn't meeting our needs, then we have the right to vote them out. Most of us don't do that, maybe because we're uninformed or because we're satisfied with the work that folks in office are doing. But
Wow.
I say that we actually do have term limits if we choose to exercise them.
Wow. Hey, so that's a powerful answer. So I'm going to take that as if you were in the state of Maryland or in Baltimore, question K, you would vote no against that. And because you say that the power of the vote is what keeps people out of office if we don't become satisfied with their work. So is that what you're saying? So we got two no's and one two yeses and one no. So you're a no, Bev. You don't
I
support
would
term limits.
probably say no.
Okay. And so a lot of people stated that, and we'll wrap up this conversation, that when you have incumbents in office, like we had one council person that was in office for 30 something years, and I'm going to say this, probably shouldn't, that all of the special interest groups were afraid not to cater to her, afraid not to turn up to her political fundraisers, afraid not to donate money to her because they were afraid they'd be on the out if she won and she saw that they hadn't donated to her campaign. So that's one of the reasons why, and you rarely hear me endorse anything, but I endorse term limits. Whenever I interview a candidate, I ask them what it is that they feel about term limits. And if they don't support term limits, it is very difficult for me to support them. Because special interest money, when it gets into politics, it makes it very difficult for a neophyte to become involved, and particularly our young people. And therefore, you see people hanging on at the age of 88, right? In a wheelchair or a stroller because they become intoxicated with power. So question K, in Maryland or Baltimore, and you rarely hear me endorse anything, but I endorse question K, regardless of where it comes from. But let's turn into the national politics because we know that there are some consequences in the House and the Senate. We were on this show almost 2 years ago talking about Joe Biden becoming president of the United States behind a Donald Trump, who people were very much uncomfortable with in many communities, many urban communities. So here it is 2 years later, and we've talked about and educated how important midterm elections are. We always turn out for the Obama first election, the Obama second election, the Biden first election, even turned out for Trump when Trump was elected in 2016. The Republicans turned out in support of him. Even he was surprised that he won. But midterms rarely get the turnout. This year, however, has been substantially different. Substantially different, and maybe it's the mood of the country from the end of the Trump administration and some of the issues that people were uncomfortable with on either side of the fence to a point where we're seeing record numbers. So, Bev, let's start with you. As
Okay.
you have traveled from Boston, and I think you were in Iowa, and as you
Yes,
have
correct.
looked at elections around the country of relevance. And I think that you focus much in the U.S. House of Representatives. What is it that you see as the mood, and what is the danger of the Democrats losing control of the U.S. House? Let's talk the House first.
Okay, well, historically, the party that's in power in the White House always loses seats. They may not necessarily lose control of the Congress, but they always lose seats. Right now, we have a 5-seat majority. That means that 3 seats either way will change the shift of balance of power in the Congress. If you remember what the Republicans did to Obama during the Obama administration, that is not something that you want to have happen to Joe Biden, which is why it is absolutely imperative to get out for the midterms, because we've got 435 seats in Congress. We don't want to lose a 1. And that's generally not the trend during midterms.
So that's it. That you say I do not or you do not. That is if I'm in favor of Joe Biden. Because if I'm not in favor of Joe Biden, then I want the House to turn. And there's one thing that we recognize in our community, and you can see it down in Georgia as we talk about Georgia. We can see it in Florida with Marco Rubio as well. Not all blacks and all people of color support the Democratic Party. Matter of fact, I think in the state of Maryland, it has been shown that the Hispanic population, which has become significant, is more than half in support of the Republican Party. So when you look at the agenda, and Bob, I'd like to point this question to you. When you look at the agenda of a guy like Joe Biden, and to what Beverly said about the significance of holding on to the House to support his agenda, is there a part of his agenda that you feel is a need to support to ensure that the House remains Democratic, or are you okay with it flipping and you feel as though it should flip?
I'm not okay with having a choice between a party that's resigned itself to people who are willing to die, lie, cheat, steal, or go to jail for their leader, as just opposed to another party that debates whether or not they want to have him stand with them at the election fundraiser. I resent the fact that quite frankly, Michael, I think that the so-called two-party system with closed primaries is the nemesis of democracy as you and I believe it should be. I will not vote for anyone solely because of what party they're in. There's always been some of that, but now it's reached a level where it's paramount. We don't care, for example, in Georgia, that Herschel Walker lied about being the valedictorian of his high school class. We don't care in the state of Georgia about Herschel Walker lied about graduating from Georgia, about Herschel Walker lied about being the top 1% of his graduating class at Georgia. We don't care. Why? Because he's a Republican. That's ridiculous. It's utterly, and that's what's dangerous. That's what's got to be so. Truth doesn't matter anymore. It's only what party you're in and how much power you can retain or gain for that party. And that's ridiculous. That is ridiculous.
So we have started, and we'll do a little delay as we get Bob muted so that we don't get the echo. So we started with Georgia. So let's go ahead and continue with Georgia. So is it to the point of the question or what you raised as an issue in terms of the credibility of Herschel Walker? And right now, that is a dead heat. In spite of what Bob has said, the issues with Herschel Walker, the credibility. Did he pay for an abortion? Did he lie about being valedictorian? Did he even graduate from the University of Georgia? That there have been issues of credibility of Raphael Warnock. They brought up the fact that his church that they evicted people out of their public housing, out of their housing project that were poor and destituted. They even brought up the fact that there were some issues of credibility with Reverend Warnock and his divorce. So is it any politician that is clean enough that we should have to look at background? I mean, background is important, but how do you weigh it? Because even you brought up, Bob, Democrat, Republican, or does it not make a difference?
You're asking me, are there gradations of lies? Yes. You lie to me about whether it's raining outside. Okay, I may take an umbrella or I may get wet. You lie to me about whether that truck is going to hit me if I go in the street. I'm going to live or die. One lie makes a difference to me. One I could pass off. The problem is we're lying about crucial elements. We're lying for the purpose of changing and influencing directly how somebody votes. Julius Henson faced jail over that. They call it robocalling. It's a difference between honest propaganda and deliberate misrepresentation.
Wow.
But
So Rhonda, right. So Rhonda, what do you feel about that? You mentioned earlier that you look at candidates, you don't vote party. Well, maybe you didn't say that. That you look at candidates. Right? So what do you feel? And I know you've lived in the state of Georgia, right? And Georgians love their hero and worship their hero. Herschel Walker won't be the first athlete or actor. I think of Ronald Reagan and I think of some other actors and athletes to be elected to a United States Congress or Senate. But what do you feel about the Herschel Warnock situation in Georgia?
So I did. I lived in the Atlanta metropolitan area for 12 years. And I actually lived in a city called Clarkston, which was very Confederate, very Confederate. Um, Georgia could use a lot more blue. Let me just say that. They could use a lot more blue, and Maryland could use a lot more red. But nobody cares that Herschel paid for an abortion. You know what? People care. Can they put food on their table right now? And people in Georgia care that they keep that Confederacy going. They do, and Herschel is the candidate they selected. It's not about his little lies he tells or how crazy he is, or it's not about that. It's about, will this man keep going what I want going, or will he give me what I want? It's not about what he lied about in his personal life. They don't care. Just like people don't care that Westmore wrote a book about some stuff that wasn't true. People aren't focused on Westmore writing a book about there was a bunch of lies. They don't care about that. I'm voting for Westmore. But it's the same with Herschel Walker. They're the same to me. Same kind of lies.
Did you
More.
say that you're voting for Westmore?
Who, me?
Yeah, you just said that.
I said no, people. I didn't say I was voting for Westmore.
Oh,
I
okay. I thought that I interpreted that you said that
I said
that's why I'm voting for
I said,
Westmore.
but Westmore and Herschel Walker kind of got the same kind of lies. They're moral lies.
Wow.
They're moral lies. I don't care if one was a book and one was a baby.
I think Bob just pulled his wig off. Bob just pulled his wig off.
And that's
You
fine.
know, it went crooked. So, what about what Rhonda just said, Bob? Do you have issues with that? The comparable between Westmore and Herschel Walker, to Rhonda's thoughts, are the same.
Lies.
I'm snatching mine off, so when you finish,
And Bev just snatched her wig off too. So we've got some hairless people on the air right now based on that analogy of Westmore. Westmore endorsed by Oprah Winfrey and Herschel Walker endorsed by seemingly, everyone that's Republican of any sort of stature. So Bob, what is it that you went like that about? You have an issue or no issue with Westmore's book?
Michael, let me say this again. Unfortunately, we live in a time where truth doesn't matter anymore, and so we argue about how far we are from telling it when we open our mouths. What I'm saying, I don't care that Westmore isn't really the other Westmore. He didn't say he was to get me to make a life-threatening decision or life-preserving decision. He didn't say that and maybe he said it to try to induce me to buy a book. But my life is not going to turn up or down, or whether or not I do or do not buy the book, or whether it's given to me by gift. When someone tells me a lie for the purpose of affecting a decision that's supposed to affect, and they intended to affect my life, then I take it a little more seriously. When somebody tells me in order to establish their capacity to operate as a U.S. Senator, but they can't tell the truth about whether they graduated as a valedictorian of the high school, or they can't tell the truth about what college or university they graduated from and didn't remember that they didn't graduate at all, And when they can't remember who they wrote a check to, those things, and they do that and they lose that memory only for the purpose and solely for the purpose of causing me to make a decision that can either preserve, enhance, or take away from the rest of my life, then I care. And those lives are not the same.
Wow.
So
You
we
know,
rating
it's a good thing. Go
so
ahead, Rhonda.
are we rating the quality of lie? So Westmore's lies are 1 and Herschel Walker's lie is a 10. Is that what we're doing now? We're rating the quality of lies?
Yes,
Boy, they
because
got
these
Bob
are
muted.
yes,
I'm not rating a lie. I'm
yeah.
rating the quality of a candidate. Herschel Walker is a shame and an embarrassment. The
Probably.
Republican Party put him up against Reverend Warnock because they wanted a compliant black puppet. Herschel Warnock, I'm sorry, Herschel Warner
Walker.
didn't
I
even
like
live.
that name, Bev. I like Herschel Warnock. Maybe that's how we get them together. So now we got Herschel Warnock.
They
That
won't
name
get
sounds
together, trust
absolutely
me.
awesome, Bev.
No, they won't get together. Trust me. Herschel Walker was a sports star in Georgia, but he lived in Texas. The Republicans moved him to Georgia so that they could get him to run for senator. He's a carpetbagger. He has absolutely no ability to interpret legislation. The Republicans have only put him up because they know that only a black man could win against another black man.
Wow. Hey, so
So
let me ask the final question because fortunately we have 49 more states and the province of Puerto Rico, which by the way can't vote in presidential elections. It's amazing how they treat people of color in Puerto Rico when it comes to national elections. So let's say yes or no to each of the three of you. Do black people win regardless of whether Herschel Walker or Raphael Warnock win? Do we win? Rhonda, yes or no?
Well, I mean, I think the way the state is, I would support Warnock if I lived in the state of, even though I'm not a Democrat. If I still lived in the Atlanta metropolitan area, I would vote for Warnock. Okay.
But do we win with either one? As
I,
black people, when you see the ability to we have Rick Scott, I believe, or Tim Scott from
Tim
South
Scott.
Carolina is the only other U.S. senator that's black. Oh, we got Booker in New Jersey, so we've got two. So now either one of these will add a third one. So do we win with either one, or do we lose as a people if Herschel Walker's elected? Yes or no, Rhonda?
well, you don't win if Herschel Walker is elected. You know, the direction of the state of Georgia going blue wins if Warnock wins, and the state needs some blue. It needs blue. Those rural areas need blue. Those rural areas are all red. It needs blue.
So,
So
so Bev, do we win either way with either one since we got two black men
mm,
facing off and we will have another black U.S. senator regardless of who wins that election? Are we still winners?
does black matter in this case? The answer is
I'm asking
well,
you.
the answer is hell no.
You said what? No?
I said hell no, and
Oh,
I'm
okay, I
looking at
got you.
this.
So you're saying no that
Herschel
if
Walker,
Herschel Walker's elected as a people, we lose.
He is a
yes,
Republican puppet. He will vote against any and every interest we have in the same way that Tim Scott votes against any and every interest that
but
we have
who
as
is
Wow,
black
we?
wow.
people.
So you just threw
As
something to
you
Tim
know,
Scott
they
too.
say skin folk ain't always kinfolk.
Well, who is
And
Wow.
we?
So
in
I
that
can't
case,
wait till we do the
hold on.
show where we get the prototype black politician and what that looks like
Mhm.
to mainstream America. So what does the black prototype politician look like from a standpoint that we don't look at two black politicians, even though we don't necessarily agree with them, and as a people don't see that we still win regardless. So Bob, I'm going to go ahead and formally ask you your opinion, although I know because your wig's crooked, which way you're going to go. So what do you see? Do you see that we're winners anyway because we've got a black politician that's going to go to the U.S. Senate where we've only seen 10 of them in the past 180 years?
The choice is between voting for a freedman and a slave. There is no choice for black people.
Wow. 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 Hey, so let's move on because, time is moving and we've got, like I said, a bunch of other states I'd like to cover. And I apologize to the production team that we went a bit out of order. But let's go to Wisconsin, the wonderful state of Wisconsin. Bev, what do you know about Wisconsin and Mandela Barnes? They're saying that Mandela Barnes, and can you all guess which one is Mandela Barnes? Nah, don't even
I
worry
already
about it.
know.
And that's the issue right there that people are saying. The fact that Mandela Barnes, because that's an identifier, right? They say that it's a advantage to him, and I can't fathom that. And then you've got Ron Johnson, who is what they call an election denier. Bev, what's your thoughts on this race, if you have any?
Well, I'm somewhat familiar with Wisconsin. Um, Senator Ron Johnson is another person who is barely human as far as I'm concerned. He is an election denier. He attempts to hide his racism under a rock from time to time, but we know where it is. He needs to be gone. Mandela Barnes is a Black person running in Wisconsin. He has run and won statewide as lieutenant governor. Whether or not he has a chance to be the Democratic senator from Wisconsin is still up in the air. Ron Johnson has a lot more money coming his way from large Republican donors. Mandela Barnes has an upward fight still.
Yeah, and right now that race is 50-48. Mandela Barnes has pulled within the margin of error. It's 50 Ron Johnson, who is a incumbent against Mandela Barnes. And this is in the state of Wisconsin. And this is, Bev, one of those states where, it's going to be a call as to whether the Democrats hold on to the United States Senate. And this is the importance, and Bev is going to talk about it before we get off, the importance of us not only looking in our state, and that's as Rhonda did, the ballot questions that we say apply wherever you are. This is information. This is education. It's not about just going and voting. It's about understanding why you're voting and what you're voting for. Bev is going to talk about why you have to support in other states candidates that may not live in your state because of the influences that it has to the House and the Senate, as we'll probably see come January. So Bob, anything you understand or want to talk about with Mandela Barnes and Ron Johnson in Wisconsin before we move on to that wonderful state of Arizona with Kerr Lake?
I can't really add anything to what Bev has said about Ron Johnson. He's diabolical. He is the epitome of but he's an indication of how weak the so-called Democratic Party really is. I can't get over the fact. That as black folk we purportedly cling to a party that is so weak it won't stand behind its chosen leader, where the other guys are willing to die for him, but yet I'm supposed to trust you with my life.
Wow, that's powerful. Hey, so let me ask a question, then we're going to move on to Arizona. Ron, I'm going to ask you this question, right? So we always talk and preach about getting out the vote, right? We tell our people, you got to vote, you got to vote, you got to vote, right? Bev, do you agree with that?
Of course.
Now, do you hope that they don't vote if they wanted to vote for Herschel Walker and they look like you and you just told them to go get out the vote?
If you vote because Herschel Walker...
That's a yes or no question, Bev. But I'm going to let you explain it because you're such a wonderful person. But I think I kind of tricked you there. But you know what I mean.
No, you didn't, because I didn't actually hear all of your question.
So the question was, you want to hear it again?
Do I want people to vote? Yes, I want people to vote, and I want them to be informed in their vote. If you are informed in your vote, then you are probably going to vote for Reverend Warnock. Herschel Walker would be an insult to you if you did any homework or had any respect for yourself. I'm really putting it out there, aren't I?
Wow. I'm going to leave that one alone. So Rhonda, what do you think? You out there encouraging people to vote. We're telling people to get out the vote. Stacey Abrams, and we haven't even talked about the gubernatorial race in Georgia, right, with Stacey Abrams, and it doesn't look like she's going to win. She's down 7-8 points, and people are not unhappy with Kemp. They're not unhappy with Kemp. They're not unhappy with the the Secretary of State down there because they seem to hold their own. And we know that Kemp is not endorsed by Donald Trump, and he's a Republican, right? And people in Georgia seem to be a conservative bunch, and Stacey did a phenomenal job of getting people to vote. And so some people are voting down ticket, which means that if you start at the top with the Republican and you go all the way down the ticket, that Herschel Walker may get some benefit. However, the polls are showing that Democrats are not going to cross over, or Republicans are not going to cross over and vote for Raphael Warnock. They're just not going to vote for Herschel Walker. And this is what it looks like now. Matter of fact, coming on to this show today, it's a 48-48 deadlock as of yesterday, this particular Senate race. But the question, Rhonda, does it make a difference who I vote for since you've been out there pleading for me to vote? Is that you're happy that I voted regardless of whether I don't vote for your candidate? Yes or no?
I just think it's well. Let me say this, and I know this is not going to be popular. People who don't read the ballot and people who don't go beyond the campaign signs and they just vote because somebody told them to vote for. Oh, I voted for that person because Kwesi said he was voting for him. I say stay home. Don't vote, okay? Because you're wasting time. Vote for the person that works for your household and your community. That's what you should be voting for. You should be right now voting about the economy and how you're going to put food on your table and how you're going to put gas in your car. Damn the party. Vote for your home. Vote for yourself. Vote for your community. Forget all the other stuff. Read the ballot.
Wow.
And
That is powerful. That is powerful. It almost sounds similar to Bev, and I'm going to make a statement before we transition to Arizona, another battleground state. The statement seems to me, as I interpret you guys, that if you're not going to vote Democratic or if you're not going to vote Republican, don't listen to what I said to go out and vote. I want you all to vote. I'm registering you to vote. And as long as you vote my way, it's okay. Is that a statement that we seem to be implying or seem to be making as we're telling people to go out and vote and truly allow people to vote, not their conscience, but their choice? And we have to think about that. And as you look at Georgia and you go down to Florida and you look at the consequences there of signing up and registering people to vote, I wonder how Stacey Abrams is feeling that many of the people that she signed up to vote are actually going to vote for Herschel because they love the way that he carried the football. Let's go to Arizona. Mark Kelly, the Democrat incumbent, right? And Arizona is one of these quirky states, right? Just like Nevada, where the Democrat, Republican, and it seems as though the people of color there, particularly the Spanish people, make a difference in the election. Anyone want to comment? And so here is Kelly with within the margin of error, 2% ahead. And this is as of yesterday. And Masters, the Republican, is 43%. And Victor, we have Victor there because if you look at Victor, Mark Victor was 6%, him being a so-called spoiler. And they believe that if Arizona loses, the Democrats lose Arizona, the Democrats will lose the Senate. What do you all think about that?
The Senate is a 50-50 tie at this point. If the Democrats lose any one seat without gaining another, then they have lost the Senate. It's not that the Democrats have a majority now. It's that it's a 50-50 tie. And if every Democrat agrees, then Kamala Harris will break the tie, probably on behalf of the Democrats. Democrats cannot afford to lose one seat. But when we talk about, who you vote for, do your homework. Who is the person who has your interest at heart? If a Republican has your interest at heart, then by all means vote for them. I have not seen one in the past, 20-something years that has. But if you feel that they do, then vote for them.
So back to your point, why do people feel as though the Democrats have a better handle on money and the economy, and the fact that we're in an inflationary period that for many people is very troubling, and And people are going through what I understand are terrible times. They feel as though that the Republicans can put a check and balance on Biden. People aren't very happy that Biden has sent a lot of money over to Ukraine. It's been said that when the Republicans take over the Senate, this is what they say, and the House, that the first thing they're going to do, they're going to stop the money train going to Ukraine. So is that something that is party specific, handling dollars during an inflation? Did Trump do a decent job with the economy? Bob, what do you say?
First of all, the Republicans haven't said they're going to stop the money going to Ukraine. That was that crazy woman Marjorie Greene that said that. Secondly, Biden didn't send it money to Ukraine. The U.S. Congress, based on a bipartisan vote, sent 67 as of a week ago, $67 billion to Ukraine. But that was sent by both Democrats and Republicans. I don't get much past in Arizona, of course. In addition to the Mark Kelly, I think that's where you've got that other crazy woman, Kathy Lake, running out there. I think she is. But so the problem is our choices. The problem is that the people who we really want to have office or put in office aren't able to be elected because they can't get on the ballot because the two-party system and closed primaries keep them out. That is the nemesis of democracy, as you and I and most people believe it functions.
To your point, Kari Lake is the latest stat has her up that I saw before we got on the air, 53 to 42%. Kari Lake is a TV host, and she is off the chain, right? People feel and you know, some people are attracted to that aggressive, no nonsense style, careless, reckless conversations and comments. And then Katie Hobbs, which I think to her detriment, and we're going to talk about the debate in Pennsylvania as well. Katie Hobbs, which I feel to her detriment, refused to debate Kari Lake. And, you know, we're going to project that Kari Lake surprisingly wins that gubernatorial race. So Bob, you mentioned that that the House and the Senate is the one that sent money to Ukraine. Is that what you said?
I said the U.S. Congress, the House and Senate approved legislation which appropriated and authorized to be spent as of a week ago $67 billion to Ukraine. Yes.
And both of those houses are what? Those are Democratic houses at the moment, right?
The Senate is
they've already indicated.
No, the Senate is a Democratic House because with the vice president, that gives them the majority on any ties.
If all people vote the same, you will remember that Manchin and
Sinema, yeah.
So it's a tie. It is not a Democratic majority.
So what you just told me, Bev, is that being a Democrat, when you look at Sinema and Manchin, doesn't really mean a damn thing either, right?
Which is why when we vote, we are going to get more Democrats in the Senate so that we go above 50-50. So that
let's swing to Pennsylvania real quick, and John Fetterman, and what's the gentleman's name? Mehmet Oz, Dr. Oz. Oprah made Dr. Oz, but she refused to endorse him, and she just came out and endorsed John Fetterman. Now, given the issues with John Fetterman, mainly health, and the fact that he goes around campaigning in a hoodie, right? What do you think about this race in a state that usually goes back and forth between being blue or red?
Well,
Rhonda?
it's not that he wears a hoodie. It's what's under the hoodie. He's got a brain. He's got political experience. He's been a mayor. He's now the lieutenant governor. He knows what he's doing. You know, Americans are very superficial. We voted for Donald Trump because we presumed he was wealthy and he was a person whose face we saw on television. Given the choice between two candidates, Americans will vote for the one that's taller and who has more hair. That's about as superficial as you can get, but that's what we do. We don't do our homework. We don't know who has our interest at heart. Again, Mehmet Oz is another carpetbagger. He really is from New Jersey. He has been put up by the Republicans to run, and because again he has name recognition in the same way that Herschel Walker has name recognition, they're depending on that to get him through. If he'll say, "I'm not a politician," that's not necessarily a good thing. He knows nothing about the issues. He's a television doctor. John Fetterman is someone who has been in various political offices, in elected political offices, and he knows what he's doing. They're
So,
really
Bev, to your point earlier, if Dr. Oz wins this race, then the U.S. Senate goes to the Republicans. Is that accurate?
if everything else stayed the same, then it would.
And right now, as of yesterday, it's a 46.6 to 46.3 dead heat in this election. And Pennsylvania usually goes Republican, right, Bev?
Not necessarily.
It went Democratic for Biden last
It
time,
did.
but it also went red for Trump in 2016, right? So they
I
flip
love
flop.
this. I love this statistic. In 2016, Pennsylvania, I believe, voted for Trump by something like 43,000, like 500 votes. Uh, that's what? How many people per block in Philadelphia who could have gone out and voted? They didn't, and it made the difference. There's a New Hampshire Senate candidate who won her last race by 1,017 votes. There were more people than that in my college dorm. These are races that are won by inches, and it depends on who gets out.
And to the point, Bev, that we made earlier when we talked about this being so far, this midterm is seeing record turnout in voters, with the exception of our young people and black voters. To your point, Bev, and you mentioned Philadelphia and the suburbs of Philadelphia, because beyond that, and maybe a little bit of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania isn't, a huge state with black demographics. It's important for us to vote if we feel as though this is an important race to decide national direction, as we know the U.S. Senate and the House of Representatives determine. And this is why Bev's education of understanding elections throughout the country and the implications is important. And I just want to get a sense from Bob and Rhonda about John Fetterman and Dr. Oz, right? The Wizard of Oz. That's what they call him up in Philadelphia, right? So what do y'all think about the Wizard of Oz? That was Oprah made. Oprah made him, and she's created a monster apparently, because no longer does she support him.
Who, me or who you want to?
Whoever wants to go.
Well, first, I'm uncomfortable with Oprah endorsing people. Period. But I just don't understand why her opinion should matter. But as far as Pennsylvania, which is a state that I watch often because I have friends in Pennsylvania, um, most of Pennsylvania is kind of Trump. It's a Trump territory, and it's when you look at the Republicans versus the Democrats, I just think that it's not. It's how much in the middle are you? It's not. Dr. Oz has gone a little bit off the rail. But I think it just like Maryland. You know, you have to kind of be in the middle, especially if you're a Republican. You got to be in the middle to get it. You got to be in the middle in order to win. And Dr. Oz is not in the middle, so that's the reason that I don't think he's the best candidate, for that reason and that reason only.
That is great. That's fantastic. Bob, any points you'd like to make?
Commonwealth of Pennsylvania is like two different jurisdictions. From the Western Pennsylvania is like night and day from Philadelphia. And so, if there's any place where we're getting the right people out and right numbers to vote makes a difference, it is in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
Fantastic. Hey, listen, as we begin to wrap up, predictions. I want to talk predictions. I want Bev to talk about, the importance of, but I want to talk about Florida. Val Demings is running against Marco Rubio. Marco Rubio ran against Donald Trump, didn't do very well. Matter of fact, I think he tissed Donald Trump off, right? And look how much money that Val Demings has spent. She spent 3.8 million, and right now she's losing in the polls by over 7%. It looks like a Marco Rubio, who's the incumbent, victory there. But Marco Rubio tissed Trump off. He ran for president. Val Demings, she oversaw one of the impeachments of Donald Trump as the House manager, and former sheriff of Orlando or Orange County. What do you all think of this race here? And Marco Rubio is Spanish, right? He's Latino, and they tend to favor Republicans down in Florida. Why is that, Bev?
Let's call Marco Rubio white adjacent. I believe he's
Cuban. What's that new term?
I said white adjacent.
White
that means
adjacent.
That even though he may be nominally a person of color, Cubans, and I believe Rubio is Cuban, really consider themselves like Caucasians.
Is that kind of selective there, Bev? Are you being kind of selective with that terminology to a point where, because maybe you said the same thing about Herschel Walker as well. Is he like kind of similar to him? And
no, white adjacent would mean what your skin looks like.
Is that because Herschel's a lot darker than Marco Rubio? Because he looks a little Hispanic to me.
No. Marco Rubio is obviously of Spanish extraction. However,
obvious.
But Spanish people are white. Okay, the only reason we think only reason we think they're brown is because after Columbus, they came here, they took over, they intermarried with Indian people.
Wow.
Hence the color. However, Cubans consider themselves white. And they're going to be Republican because of all of the politics in the 60s, anti-Castro. The older folks have Castro in their memories. They're going to be Republicans. Marco Rubio, come on. Does he look more brown or does he look more white? He is white adjacent. So people are going to vote for him for that reason.
Hey, so one thing interesting about Marco Rubio, who used to be the Speaker of the House of Florida, he sponsored a commission on a study of the social disparities between black men and boys, right? He sponsored one in Florida, a commission to study the disparities of black men and boys in Florida, and he co-sponsored with Congresswoman Federico Wilson in the U.S. Senate a similar commission, bipartisan commission, that's in effect now, to come up with ways to enact policies to counter measures against ineffective policies against black men and black boys, and he champions that. So what do you all think about that race, Rhonda and Bob? And Rhonda, it seems though you have some discomfort with Bev's perspective of Rubio.
Oh my God, no, people in general. The dehumanizing comments that have been made, even, calling Herschel Walker a slave. I think that was Mr. Robert that said that. Everyone has a right to their opinion and their beliefs and their vote and everything else. But to break people down on their complexion, to even say Cubans are considered white. I know very dark Cubans. It's just, what are we doing here? Is this who we are as a people? Are we looking at how we're surviving in America? Or are we breaking people down because they're the wrong complexion? I just think it's wrong. I just don't like it.
Well, is that what people thought on January 6th in terms of the disparity between Black Lives Matter protests and St. John's Square outside of St. John's Episcopal Church in Washington, D.C. versus the Capitol? So is it always conversations of color and disparity that we're having? And that's why we're here in America dealing with the issues that we're dealing. As much as I agree with you, but is that what we're reduced to as a people? Is it really a racial thing in terms of this particular election and the consequences that it has on people, not of color, but black people? Is that what we're really talking about?
Race will always play an issue. But when you break down something on your, oh, you might be Latino, but you're considered white or whatever, who determines that? We're talking about a political platform. What is this person going to do to the balance of Congress? What is this person going to do for the people of Florida? It doesn't matter if he's considered white. It doesn't matter if he's considered, it's just, it's
I
one.
hear you, Rhonda. I don't disagree with you, but to Beverly's point, Floridians, and this is my interpretation of what I see to Beverly's point in Florida with Cubans and people of Spanish descent, is that they align closer with the philosophy of Republicans or a white dominated Republican Party in Florida than they do with Democratic, and they try to align, I believe, from a color aspect of it. They don't want to be associated as a person of color. That's just my interpretation. So as much as I have a disdain for it as you do, it seems as though that's how people are aligning themselves. And it's starting to happen in the state of Maryland, too. A typical blue state where Spanish people are aligning with the Republican Party because they don't want to be associated with the Democratic Party because the Democratic Party seems to be one of whatever. So it's been
And
real interesting to see that, you know?
and that is what I mean by
One
white
what?
Yeah,
adjacency.
and
I'm not,
I
I'm
understand that.
not labeling Marco Rubio. Marco Rubio has labeled himself, and I am simply commenting on it.
Right.
Cubans in Florida have labeled themselves, and I am simply commenting on it. I have not determined them to be anything one way or the other. I
Good
am
point.
saying, I am repeating what they say about themselves.
Hey, so we had a question up there about the state of democracy in America, right? Is America a democracy anyway? Is it, it almost seemingly from people's perspective became an autocratic form of government in the last year of Donald Trump's administration. Interested in the panel's thoughts on the loss of democracy. Bob, any thoughts on the loss of democracy? Have we lost democracy as a definition here in the United States? Let's go with you and then go around the horn to Bev and then to Rhonda.
You cannot have a democracy which does not believe in, establish, and promote equality of all of its people. You cannot have equality for black folk unless you begin with paying your bill. That's where it all begins. Pay your bill, then we move on from there, right? So the answer is there has never been a true democracy here, and can never be until the country pays its bill to all of its citizens.
Wow, well, we got to get you back, Bob, so we can ask you the difference between a true democracy and whatever democracy that you're alluding to that we have now. Bev, what is it that you feel about that question? Is have we lost a sense of democracy here in the United States?
Well, I would say it's pretty easy. Look at which party has put forth the legislation, period, which restricts voting, which makes it more difficult, which curtails the rights of people. If you know who that is, then you would say, if I vote Republican, I am going to lose what I know of as democracy. These are the people who have out and out told you that they prefer some people over others. They are willing to hurt some people over others. And they are willing to deny people the vote because of what they look like. Now, when Rhonda talks about like dividing people by color, that is not something that the general public, well, there are probably a lot of people in the general public who do divide people by color, but it's the Republicans who have said, yep, ever since Obama, I'm going to make sure that voters don't have enough power to get another black man in office. That was their existential crisis. They have been white lashing that ever since.
Wow,
So
that's
yes,
powerful.
if we vote for Republicans, then yes, we are voting to we're voting to get rid of our democracy at not only the national level, but it is also happening at the state levels with many of the secretaries of states and governors who would like to take over the national function of declaring who's won an election.
Wow, that's powerful. So, Bev, the next time I have you on, which will be in a week or two, real soon, I'm going to ask you, as you mentioned, us denying people the opportunity to vote, but You saying that you prefer people didn't vote if they were going to vote for Herschel Walker. What
I didn't
difference
say
does it
that.
make? But I'm going to get to you. I know you didn't say that, but we're going to expand on that conversation. You hope that they don't vote, right? You hope that they don't vote.
As I said, I want people to vote, but I want them to be well informed. If they're well informed, I believe they'll know what
They
choices
won't vote for Herschel Walker, is what you said,
they
right? And that's
won't.
just a power of example. So, Rhonda, what about you? Have we lost a sense of democracy in America?
I don't think we ever had democracy. I'm with Mr. Robert. I mean, if you in a two-party controlling capitalist society, that's why somebody's always going to be left behind. If you're in a two-party capitalist society, there is no democracy. Why don't everyone have open election? Why doesn't the state of Maryland have open election? Michigan has it. That's how they voted for Bernie in the primary. But we don't have that in the state of Maryland. It wasn't there when I lived in the state of Georgia, and it definitely wasn't there when I lived in Washington, D.C. There is no democracy. So when we have Biden and Obama out there selling some brainwashing on democracy, we're about to lose a sense of democracy. I'm thinking, what you talking about, man? I'm trying to go to the grocery store and put some food on my table. I don't care about no democracy. I care about the grocery store and I'm filling up my refrigerator.
I have got to say something about that. And yes, people vote on the economy, but do they really think the economy is going to change if Republicans win? The person in the White House is not responsible for inflation in the US. The inflation we have now is a worldwide phenomenon. It's due to the war in Ukraine. It's due to the pandemic. That's the reason we have worldwide inflation. And the US, as hurting as we are, actually has the lowest rate of inflation of the major nations in the world. So when we complain about how terribly we have it, again, if we were better educated, we could still be angry about inflation. We would still want more to be done about it. But we would also understand that this has nothing whatsoever to do with Joe Biden in the White House, but it has to do with a world economic situation.
Well,
And
you know,
this narrative
you have a very, very valid point there.
very
And as we
narrow.
wrap, yeah, I like to wrap
Can
up,
I have
and I'd
one
like to
last
wrap up,
statement, Michael?
huh?
Can I have one last statement? As a real
Sure,
estate,
sure.
I'm a real estate broker. I've been selling real estate for 40 years. I've seen many trends. When the election was going on, and people were saying, "Oh, Trump, this, that, and the other." I told my real estate friends, I said, "You better hope he stays in there because if Biden gets in there, we're going to hit inflation. Then it's going to be a recession because that's the trend that has been since I've been a realtor since I was 19 years old. When the Democrats get in, we hit an inflation. It's just a series of what happens, and if you study politics, you know that. You know that the open checkbook, give the homeless people 10 million, but only 3 million get there when the Democrats are in office. We know that. Program's gonna last 5 years, it only lasts 2.5. That's been the cycle, So I'm totally in disagreement with everything you just said.
Well, if Rhonda is as knowledgeable as she says she is, then she knows that after a Democratic administration, the national deficit is always lower. It has always been reduced. After a Republican administration, it has always been higher. It has always been increased. So, as someone with a great deal of political knowledge, which she says she has, then I assume she would share that information
I
with
said
you
real estate.
because it
I
is
said real estate.
correct.
I said real estate knowledge. I'm talking about the real estate cycle, and real estate is what makes the economic cycle go around. I'm talking
Real
about real estate. When
real
those interest
estate
rates go up and it costs more money to borrow money and people start struggling, let me tell you, it happens every single time the
real
Democrats
estate
are.
is dependent on many factors. And if you as I don't think you're as old as I am. However, if you remember the 80s when
I
Ronald Reagan was president from 1980 to 88, um, the interest rates for real estate was in the teens. I felt sorry for people who had to buy houses then because the interest rates were in the
I
teens.
started
We are
selling.
nowhere near that now, and that was during an 8-year Republican administration,
I was
followed by
selling
another 4-year Republican
I sold
administration.
houses in that administration, Miss Beth. I sold houses when I started selling houses. Interest rates was 17%. It was during that Carter Reagan years when I came in. And let me tell you, people bought houses and there were assumables there and there were programs for people to buy houses. CDA grant money came about under the Reagan administration, where now first time buyers could have grant funding. It started in that Reagan administration. That's when I started selling real estate.
But what you
So
said
no,
was
I
that,
might not be as old as you are, but I've been around.
but what you said, and you stated it as a fact, was that interest rates always go up during Democratic administrations, that it's a cycle of inflation and recession. And what
We're
I
going to
pointed
invite
out
you
to
guys
you,
back. We're going to invite you back. Matter of fact, we may invite you back next week because this is compelling. And I've written down some notes on each of you so that we can, really have a robust conversation and push some buttons here. But I've got one final question before we do our voter education, right? One final question of you all. And this is a yes no question. A production team, if they don't say yes or no, just hit that mute button and silence them. I'm just kidding. Will the Republicans take over the U.S. House and Senate? Yes or no? Let's start with you, Rhonda.
Let's say yes.
Will the Republicans take over the U.S. House and Senate in this general election on Tuesday or this week, since we're not going to count all the votes on Tuesday anyway? We don't do that anymore. Bob, what do you say?
No.
So you're saying that the Democrats will hold on to the U.S. House and the Senate?
Yes.
Great. Bev, your thoughts?
the House, I don't know. I really don't know. The Senate, I think it's going to be close, but we will get that actual majority, even if it's one vote.
Fantastic. Hey, again, you're watching, and we have the last couple minutes, we have an awesome tape, and I want our panelists to stay around. It's on education. This has been education. This has been an excellent panel, and hey, first of all, shout out to Darren Mohammed, right? And bring the panelists back in. I don't want them to feel as though I'm stealing all the thunder and it's just me up here. Just me big enough is good. But Darren Mohammed was supposed to be on this show today, and he's not feeling well, and we're going to get him back on because it would have been unbelievably compelling conversation, which was anyway, because I am wide awoke, right? Darren, we're going to get Darren, who does a show called State of the City in Baltimore, and this guy is provocative. And if provocative is a cuss word, then that's Darren Mohammed, man. And we're going to get him on here in this panel on here after the election so we can talk about the consequences of the results then. But we've been doing voter education today, 60 Minutes in Black America. If you're watching us on YouTube, please go up and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Our Facebook pages were streamed across 5 platforms. You guys have been awesome in watching us for over a year. But now let's play some yellow pay, right? And do some voter education. And when you go to the voting booth on Tuesday, to Rhonda's point, read the whole thing. Yellow Pain, take it away.
Enough electoral votes, more than 270, more than enough to become the 44th President of the United States. He will be the first African-American President of the United States.
I've been broke all my life, but I kept hope all them nights. You see business in my city? Yeah, they closed all them twice. I was just riding down Salem, all them damn potholes I can't drive. I know y'all can fix it faster, but I know y'all won't try. Don't nobody care about us. And that's wrong vote. Voted for Obama back in 2012. I remember that's when I had hope. He was saying, yes, we can. And everybody got less food stamps. And when I turned 21, I was still broke. I'd never vote again. I don't think I ever had a president make my life better. Did it all on my own. Ain't no politician ever do a nice gesture. I don't even know the mayor's name. I ain't never seen her one time ever. Tell me how she gonna help the city. What I'm supposed to do, write letters? What I'm supposed to do, blame Trump? He ain't never really gave it. Ain't nobody raised minimum wage. None of these jobs pay enough. I think they just want to keep us broke, cause they ain't putting nothing in place for us. This how all my people feel, but we gotta learn. We complained enough. Let me change it up. Everything I just said, everybody I know think the same way. See, they don't want to see us vote, and we never do, so we see the same thing. But all our votes really do count, and they'll never really let it show. So now I'm finna break it down, cause if I don't, you will probably never know. First thing first, back in middle school when they taught us, it was 3 branches of the government. We forgot it when we got older. It's the judicial, the legislative and executive. But all we know is the executive. That's the mayor or the governor and the president. Now, none of them three people make no laws. They just be checking them. The laws come to their desk and all they do is say no or yes to it. So when the news station tried to tell us that Barack Obama couldn't put us on, we was all salty at Obama when it was the Congress members all along. We got to focus on the legislative branch. Yeah, they the ones that make the laws. Yeah, they the ones write how much food stamp money you get on the card. But when people that wanted to help us wanted the job, I know they probably lost. Cause we ain't even know their name, we ain't know their face, we ain't know it all. So the Congress or the State House, that's legislative, they make laws. So what we want from the president is what they do. Okay, y'all? See, they election every 2 years, but we don't ever even go to those. The Congress, they can raise minimum wage, but we ain't even really know it though. So you know how back in 08, when we all voted for Obama, we was all supposed to go back in 2010 and vote for the Congress. Cause they the ones make child support laws. They the ones choose if your kids at school get to eat steak or corn dogs. The State House make the court costs. So if the country failed, then you can't say it's them, it's your fault. Cause y'all ain't know to vote for Congress members that was for y'all. And they don't gotta leave after 4 years, and we just let them sit. See, they don't want to tell you this, they want you to focus on the president. Now the third branch is the judicial, that's judges. They the reason why John Crawford and Trayvon ain't had justice. So when Meek Mill got locked up just for popping willies, we blame the judge and not the city when they let her get voted in, cause they ain't know who to vote against. Imagine life on the other side. Roads better, schools better, everybody get their license back, grocery store food better, custody of your kids back, homeless people get new shelters. If we gon' fix the U.S., we gotta start with them 2 letters, me and you. Somebody told us that the government wanna keep us broke, but the only reason why those people in the government is cause we ain't vote. And I ain't talking about the president, I'm talking about the ones we ain't know. See, they was gonna try to keep it low, but it's gonna hurt them when they see the pros.
Every time you stay home, someone is making a decision about you, making decisions about the air you breathe, the water you drink, the food your kids eat, and how much money you bring home every 2 weeks. So every time you sit out an election, every time you don't show up because you think it doesn't matter, someone else is happy that you didn't show up, so they can make that decision for you. Vote.
And as the video said, and we love that video, we've played it 4 times on this show. I don't care whether you vote for Herschel. I don't care if you vote for Val. I don't care if you vote for Ron or Mandela. If you care about whether we have the 3rd black governor in these United States in America, in the state of Maryland, then you'll go out and vote for West. We talked earlier about the fact that this midterm, if blacks do not vote, then don't hope that the U.S. Senate or the U.S. House will remain in the party that you feel is in favor as you supported Joe Biden in 2020. All of that will be lost. Thank you so much for watching 60 Minutes in Black America. Have an awesome week, and we'll see you next Sunday at 6 p.m.